Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the KOOTH PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and will publish those responses where it's appropriate to do so. Before we begin, as usual, we would just like to submit the following poll, and if you could give that your kind attention, I'm sure the company would be most grateful. And I would now like to hand you over to the executive management team from KOOTH PLC. Tim, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thanks for the introduction there, and welcome to today's H1 2024 trading update. We want to give you an overview of some of the progress we made in the first half of the year. Some of you may be new to the KOOTH story, so we're going to walk you through a bit of detail about the problem we solve, the unique solution that we've got, and the momentum that we're building, and then go into some of the highlights around our H1, and hopefully cover off any questions you've got. So Sanjay's joining me for this presentation. So let's start by walking you through a bit of detail as to why we exist as an organisation. The key reason for this is there is a growing global crisis in youth mental health. And to tackle this, we need to apply, like all things in life, the principle that prevention is better than cure. Why is this a global crisis? Well, there are a lot of things driving it, but the end result of this is that demand is outstripping supply. Every year, we're seeing a double-digit growth in those seeking support for their mental health, no more so than younger people. And if you look at a snapshot from the UK, the data's almost unbelievable. That 8% of the entire population of UK's under 25s sought help from the NHS in the last financial year. That's 950,000 individuals. 82% of NHS trusts report through data from NHS Confed, which was published a couple of weeks ago, they can't keep up with the current level of demand. And if we don't support our next generation, 75% of lifelong mental health issues are established by age 24. We're looking at a ticking time bomb here. If we don't help our next generation and individuals and give them support, build their resilience, we're dealing with lifelong mental health issues. So the only way out of this is to really focus on investing upstream to reach people and support people earlier at that first moment of need and be alongside them for life. You can see on the right-hand side here a chart that shows the level of need that there is in different regions. In some areas, it's more than 11.4% of the population are seeking support from the NHS. And look, this isn't just a UK phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. Obviously, as an organisation, we're primarily focused on our efforts in the US and the UK. And in the US, similar situation. All the trends are going in the wrong direction. This information is from the Government Centres for Disease Control, and it shows in their last study some really alarming, concerning statistics that have been worsening for the last decade. And so action's required, and that's the mandate and the objective of KOOTH, which we have over 20 years focused on developing as a service. And what that service does, it provides both early and responsive support to help address these challenges, but not as a digital island, but as a digital front door into getting support, either directly through KOOTH or in other services that are available. So that means, how do we grow upstream access? Reach people before they reach out to the NHS. So we engage them through education, through healthcare. So a GP may make a recommendation to use KOOTH to an individual, or within communities, welfare organisations, community groups, religious organisations. What we provide is a population-wide health service that aligns to something called the Thrive framework, which was developed by the Anna Freud Centre, and very much kind of the model for delivering integrated mental health care. That means that we can provide support across some spectrum of individuals that are simply looking for advice, through to those that need support to keep them safe. And all of this is delivered through our own organisation and practitioners and our technology. We have more than 300 professionals in the organisation providing counselling, emotional wellbeing support and coaching, and a clinical team that ensures their governance, quality and level of outcomes. And of course, we integrate into other services so that we can be a digital front door for an individual that may be showing signs of eating disorders, which is a really concerning, growing area of concern and cost for the NHS. We may make a referral into the NHS so that individual can get the right kind of acute support that they need. And so a young person's journey will often start by hearing about KOOTH at school they can access on their own terms, whether that be self-therapy content, a huge amount of content that's available in our platform, bearing in mind, outside of KOOTH, there's 85 billion video views on TikTok every year around the topic of mental health. Who knows what advice is being given out there? So a safe, good place to go, providing good quality, clinically supported, age-relevant content is key. There's an abundance of tools and activities that people can do to manage their mental health and well-being. So tools for life to support them. And of course, they can get support through a peer support community. We all know that getting supportive help from others on your own personal journey is really helpful, and cheering you along, and also sharing their advice for how individuals got through exam stress or anxiety, perhaps by hearing from people that have been there. And finally, with one click, accessing professional support. We've delivered over 1 million hours of support in our time. And as I mentioned, these are all delivered by our own professionals. All of that, they are all accredited, all registered, and we audit all of them to ensure that we're delivering a consistently high quality of service. So with that, let's look a bit more about some of the progress that we've made. And one of the key things about delivering this upstream support is how it benefits healthcare systems like the NHS downstream. So a couple of interesting things to share here. We reduce pressure on healthcare systems by reaching people early and reducing those that go on to need more acute care. Within our own service, what we see is more than 60% of people get the support they want through the content in the community. And of those that are engaging in professional support, 35% of them are getting the support they need through more brief interventions. So that might be a single session or infrequently coming for support as your needs change over time. The NHS, or let's say traditional psychotherapy services, don't tend to work that way. They tend to focus on 12 sessions of therapy over the perhaps 2 to 3 months. And we provide that through our platform, but only 5% of people really need that level of intense support. So we can support an entire population without having to provide that really high intensity effort. And that in itself is one key reason why £1 spent on KOOTH saved the government and NHS services over £3. We help reduction in GP, paediatrician related savings, so GPs, prescriptions, reduction in hospitalisation and A&E, and also a reduction in self-harm behaviours that may also have an ongoing cost to the NHS and other services. We are, of course, taking this model, which was developed by the York Health Economics Consortium, a reputable independent research organisation that does a lot of work with the NHS, and we're applying that in a research study in the US so that we can look at a comparable, which we expect to be significantly higher given the higher cost of healthcare. Perhaps just to move on to some of the highlights for our H1 trading update. Obviously, a key critical project for us is scaling up and delivering our service in California. Last year was a year of building the service, where we co-developed it with input from over 300 young people to bring this next generation platform to market. So some highlights that we published in our H1 results are down on the right here, which we'll go through. But the thing I really want to focus on initially is we're really honoured and delighted to see Saluna getting a shout out from Governor Newsom as his State of the State address as a real innovative approach to engage more kids early in prevention and screening. So what that means, some of the progress that we published a couple of weeks ago is we're seeing usage across every county in California. That's 58 counties. Our service is really focused on tackling health inequality, supporting individuals that may struggle to get access because of their economic situation or geographic one, or perhaps a marginalized community. So what we're seeing is more than half of those that are using Soluna coming from these marginalized communities. So that's a strong progress on our ability to really focus on health equality. Positive feedback from those that use the service. So individuals engaged with coaching are asked to provide feedback on that. And Soluna, a friend. What we're also seeing based on that pyramid that I showed a moment or two ago is that we are also seeing a higher uptake in our content and community capabilities compared to what we're seeing elsewhere. And that's partly because we've spent a lot of time putting emphasis on creating a really engaging experience there. And we're starting to see positive signs there that, if it continues, would have a margin improvement on our service. Coming on to other highlights, we'll be announcing when we go live here, but we are on the cusp of go live with our partnership with Aetna in Illinois to support the Medicaid population. Medicaid is the federal and state insurance for families of low income, and 40% of the entire youth population in the US is eligible for Medicaid. In fact, for youth behavioral health care, this is a $30 billion a year cost. So that money is already being spent. And with this double-digit demand in year on year that we're seeing, Medicaid's becoming an increasingly expensive area to support mental health. And often Medicaid contracts are given to operators to run on a per head of population. And so here, working in close partnership with Aetna, we aim to deploy KOOTH, Soluna, as it is known in the US, to support people early to reduce the downstream demand for more acute mental health care. So reach them early, reach them where they are, which is on digital devices, and give them that full spectrum of support that we spoke about earlier. We also flagged that we're making good progress in additional states. We expect to add 2 additional states the second half of the year. And of course, we'll announce details on those when they're contracted. The work that we've done to date here to enable us to get to where we are is a state-by-state wide analysis, working with a number of partners to help identify areas and states that are investing in youth mental health. I'm working with lobbyists in states to really connect us to key decision makers that either are champions for mental health or are building existing programs of work there. And then through that, demonstrate our capability to them, both through our experience in other states like Pennsylvania, California, and obviously the 20 years of work that we've done in the UK. Alongside that, we are now running a number of research and academic partnership programs to ensure that we have got US specific market research that demonstrates both the therapeutic and the economic impact of our efforts there. Should say here in Pennsylvania, we continue to provide our service. We are engaged in contract extension negotiations and will obviously announce RNS when they have concluded. Finally, to bring it back to the UK, as we know, the NHS is going through an incredible time of pressure. With the new change in government, the policy is recognition that the NHS is broken and will take some time to turn around. We are seeing some positive signs, obviously, from the government's commitment to improve mental health care, to put it on the same level of focus as physical health. And the King's speech on the 17th really echoed that, with the NHS focus on reducing waiting times, focus on prevention, and improving mental health prevention for young people. We view that digital is a fantastic way and a highly economical way to grow access across the nation and provide support at that first moment of need. And so we, as you might expect, are more active, ensuring that the great work that we already do is heard, promoted, so that there's an opportunity to expand over time on the work that we've been doing for so many years. But I think it's fair to say it's early days there, and there are good, obviously, but we expect that this will be an improving situation over time.
Great, thanks, Tim. So just taking a look at some of the updates we put into the trading update last week around financials. We'll issue our full half-year financials in September, as usual, in line with our normal timetable. But trading has been in line with our expectations for the year to date. We expect that to continue into the second half. We did see a strengthening of our cash position to just under £15 million. That's a combination of good working capital management and also a little bit of deferral of capex into the second half of the year. We remain very well funded, strong balance sheets, and in addition to the cash position, we continue to maintain a $9.5 million working capital facility, which is undrawn. Excuse me. One thing that we are sort of flagging for the second half is the sort of movement in exchange rates. The start of our year, our ARR was 64.6 million sterling. Around 70% of that is dollar denominated, and rates have stayed relatively stable at 1.25 over the last 6 to 12 months. In recent weeks, we've seen that move out to about 130. If that was to stay at those similar rates, then we would see some translation shortfall differences on revenue, but we don't believe that that will have any impact on either our margins or profitability. Thanks, Tim.
So we'll be back with a full H1 update at the end of September. And perhaps just a couple of wrap-up slides, and then we'll move it over to Q&A. So if you've got questions, please pop them in the chat.
Great. So just to summarise strategy, the US, as we've explained, is around 70% of our business. We've been very pleased with the first 6 months in California. Tim's talked about some of the outreach we've been getting into difficult-to-reach communities, sort of uptake of usage within Soluna. We're really pleased with Governor Newsom's endorsement a few weeks ago. And we are confident that we will be signing a couple of new states within the US before the end of the year. So pipeline is still looking very strong there. Aetna, the Medicaid contract, will launch within the next week or so. And Medicaid is a very exciting growth area for us, covering 40% of young people. The total behavioural health budget there is around $30 billion a year. We've talked about some of the challenges we've seen in the UK. We're expecting to see those start to sort of free up, loosen up now that the election is over. And we are quite excited about bringing the Soluna platform back to the UK in the first half of next year. We think that will enable our UK business to start to return some of the growth we've seen historically. And just to sort of touch on a couple of key financials, over 95% of our revenue now comes from contracts that are 12 months or longer, and gross margins remain over 70%.
So just to summarise it back with the investment case that we have here, I'll leave this up on the screen for now. And look, that concludes the formal part of the presentation. We'll now move on to answering your questions. So hand it back to you, Jake, for a moment, and then we can get into a Q&A.
Absolutely. Tim, Sanjay, thank you very much indeed for your presentation this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab that's situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the company take a few moments to review those questions that were submitted already, I would just like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can all be accessed via your investor dashboard. Sanjay, Tim, as you can see there, we have received a number of questions throughout your presentation this morning. And thank you to all all of those on the call for taking the time to submit their questions. Tim, Sanjay, at this point, if I may, I just hand back to you just to read out those questions and give your responses where it's appropriate to do so, and then I'll pick up from you at the end. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Fantastic. Yeah. So,
I'll just take the first one very quickly. From Jeremy, how much revenue do you expect from the Aetna partnership in Illinois? The Aetna partnership is a pilot covering around 10 to 15,000 young people initially in Chicago. It's not, the numbers are sort of commercially sensitive, but you can think of it as a sort of mid six figures sum. It's really for us an opportunity to expand into Chicago and Illinois once we've demonstrated the efficacy of what we're doing.
Great. A few more questions that have come in. So initial data looks encouraging in California, but when will more information be shared? So look, obviously when it comes to an individual contract, it's the customer's choice about how they make information available and at what frequency. So in California, our expectation is that there is bear in mind that we are one part of a large program to transform youth mental health, a $4.7 billion 5-year program of transformation. And so California themselves will be producing a dashboard, a regular update of data on that. We will update the market once that's been published. I'd expect that to be within the next 3 months so that we can continue to make sure there is a drumbeat demonstrating the impact that we're making as our project progresses. Next question was from Gary about with a strong pipeline of new business in the US, which other states or regions are you targeting for expansion? What are the pipelines? So I think you probably would expect that we would not be talking confidently on adding 2 additional states unless we were quite around that process. Again, we can't steal a state's thunder by announcing an investment that they are making. It's on them to announce that. But as you'd expect, the criteria by which we have been looking at different states is really whether there is a recognized demand and intent to invest in that. So that might be an initial line item essentially on that. And with an opportunity for us really over the next 12 months to demonstrate what we can do, the impact that we can have. So what I would guide you to is think of these in the same way that our UK business works, in the same way that we've worked in Pennsylvania, is we roll out, we land and expand. We roll out, we demonstrate the impact, we expand. With another year, we demonstrate the impact, we expand. So what I'd like to guide you through is that sort of motion to grow our presence in the US, as opposed to a lights on statewide everywhere. Of course, those opportunities are there. We'll grasp them, but that is the general motion and modus operandi that we're focused on. In terms of going back to Aetna, hurdles causing the slow progress in the Aetna partnership. Well, look, maybe a couple of things to add here. Partnerships with large organizations take some time to finalize. There was a effort to go from our very first Soluna implementation to our second one, but with that, then third and fourth become a lot quicker. We expect before the end of the year that actually a technical go live in an additional state is going to be measured in weeks. And so we're very much getting to that cookie cutter approach where we can make sure the technical effort to do that is negligible. And so that was one part of it. And then there are also a few just logistics things we needed to do. For example, we needed to register as a Medicaid provider in the state of Illinois, and there is an administrative process to do that.
Should we take the next one, Tim?
Certainly, yeah.
From John M. Many thanks for giving us retail investors a chance to hear the story. Very pleased to do that. I would actually just add that we've also, as most of you know, we can't, for regulatory reasons, we can't share broker research, but we have added to our website recently consensus numbers, so to take a look at those. John's question is, do you anticipate that future contracts in the US especially can be funded from internal resources, or might you have to raise external capital? John, at this point in time, we believe we've got a sufficiently strong balance sheet to cover the pipeline of opportunities that we're looking at. I did mention that we have an undrawn working capital facility, which we have no expectation of needing to. So at this point in time, we have no expectation of having to raise any further capital. Now, look, if a $188 million contract the size of California came along, which is not in our sort of expectations, we might be having a different conversation, but that's quite unlikely.
Next question from Stuart. Thanks for delivering the Transparency Centre information, proof that you deliver what you say you will. That's very kind of you. How has it been received by stakeholders? So for those that maybe are not aware, look, we all live in an age of information or misinformation, and so it's incumbent on us for organisations that ask us about the duty of care that we provide to young people, how we do that, how our teams are qualified, how we keep people safe, how we escalate, those kinds of things. So over the last few months, we've delivered a Transparency Centre in both the US and the UK. That is now a permanent feature of our way of working. That means that we continually updated, and it's been received very, very well. So we're continually adding to that as we get ad hoc questions. And I think for us, trust starts with transparency. And so we have got an incredible amount of experience in how to deliver at scale safe, effective services. And we feel that is a real way to demonstrate that to the rest of the world. So feedback's been very positive. Perhaps, Sanjay, I could ask you to talk about a question we've had on how we found ongoing recruitment of key hires.
Yeah, great. This is a question from Stuart. Look, I assume, Stuart, you're talking about the US, where we've made very strong progress in the last 12 months. We've hired over 200 staff, around half of whom are practitioners. The great thing about the KOOTH model, particularly in delivering our coaching services in California, is that we can hire practitioners across the whole of the US, that they work remotely, as everyone knows. Some of the state contracts, for example, Pennsylvania, where we're delivering structured counselling, our practitioners need to be licensed in the state in which they are present, but they can work on the California contract, for example. So the ability to hire across the US, we have a hub in Chicago, which is actually a great place to be hiring as well. All really goes to demonstrate that we've made strong progress, and probably if I was really picky and I was thinking about one area where things have gone perhaps a little bit slower than we expected initially, that would be around our engagement teams in California. These are the folks that, in the UK, are typically our feet on the streets. They're visiting schools, they're talking at school assembly about KOOTH, they're encouraging kids to sign up and register for the service. Given the size of California, getting statewide coverage was initially quite a challenge, but we've got to where we wanted to get to there, and actually we've been supplementing that work with digital media to probably a greater extent than we would expect to do so in the UK.
Question about, could you explain where CMS are on payment codes and how that works with your new Aetna arrangement? David, I'm going to talk at a high level on this. Obviously, Medicaid means essentially it's a pay-for-treatment type service. And in order to claim for that, typically would have a code that is recognised with a rate card and sends that. So look, there is a direction of travel around Medicaid in the US and a recognition that digital innovations have a huge role to play. There was a number of changes that were announced a few weeks ago as part of that. But often those services are, as I said, focused on treatment as opposed to prevention of treatment. And so there's no dependency or barriers for us working at Aetna on a requirement for additional codes. Of course, those would be beneficial further on. But given that essentially we have an economic impact on that, then effectively the cost justification for KOOTH in a region bears out at a population level as opposed to an individual treatment one. And so there's other areas that can get reimbursed through Medicaid programs. Question also on Soluna to the UK. So when Soluna gets to the UK, are there any particular ways you think it may change the way people interact with your service? And so Soluna in the US is primarily was developed as a coaching service, which is one part of what we do in the UK, where we do coaching and counselling. And of course, in bringing Soluna to the UK, it's not just a technology project, it's also a project to ensure that we are aligning to the needs of children and young people in the UK, and also the needs of NHS commissioners. And so alongside our technical work stream, we have research work streams working with both young people and also with our UK commissioners. That Soluna opens up the door to a few things that historically we've not done in the UK. So, for example, the topic of what's known as health navigation means that we not only refer people on to other services in California, we pick up the phone and make sure they get into those services and then check later on that they've got the support they needed. So a kind of closed model, a round trip, if you like, on that. So we're looking at whether we bring those kinds of innovations to the UK as well, what value that would deliver, what impact that would have, also cost and pricing, as well as everything else. So we're working through the art of the possible to make sure that when we bring Soluna to the UK, it's shaped to UK context and UK market. And that's why, this is a work stream we wanted some time to complete, as opposed to just viewing it as a tech-only work stream. So we expect Soluna to launch in the UK H2 next year.
Great. There's a question from Stuart. How many cross-state licensed medical practitioners have you been finding? I think I've covered that, Stuart, when we were talking about the hiring, but you've also asked such as to benefit from economies of scale. So one thing that is quite interesting here is that the launch of Soluna in California, which, as you know, still early days, we're 6 months into it, but what we are seeing is that a greater proportion than we've historically seen in the UK of users are using the self-guided tools, the self-help, the community, more so than perhaps the coaching and practitioner services. And we think that will, if that continues, that will deliver some pretty strong operational leverage within our financial operating model.
Fantastic. And final question. Of course, we couldn't do a session without talking about AI. So how will you be able to use AI in triaging or service delivery? So we will likely publish a more detailed position on AI second half of this year, but there's probably two ways to think of its use. One is within the service itself, and one is in the wider healthcare system. Within the service itself, we already use AI or machine learning, to put it precisely, to identify, let's say, posts that people might make in a daily journal, where they might flag that there is some safeguarding risk. So an individual that does a daily journal and says they're considering self-harm is going to get flagged to our safety team, who are going to message that individual to bring them into a one-to-one session. So we use AI to keep people safe. We are rolling it out in Soluna to personalize the service so that Soluna becomes your own personal tool for your mental health that knows more about your needs and wants based on your interactions. And we also see a role for AI in supporting our practitioners to help remove some of the operational burden of things they do, to help them keep focused on what their craft is, which is providing that support for individuals. So an area we are exploring is using generative AI to develop case notes and summarize chat transcripts into summary case notes, which is a great productivity tool that saves good time and allows our practitioners to focus on what they want to do, which is engaging with young people. On the bigger picture, KOOTH's got an incredible data set, one of the largest in the world around mental health, an anonymized data set, and in many ways an early warning system to identify the shifting needs, trends, and challenges within a population, within a geography, within a demographic. And there's an abundance of multidimensional data there that we see that there could be a lot more use of to enable a wider healthcare system to be more responsive, more data-driven. And AI's got a role there to help identify these small changes that are magnifying to enable us to respond quicker as an entire healthcare system. So some sort of micro and macro economic almost impact that we've got there that we are still in working our position through, and expect to be publishing something on this second half of the year. So I think that pretty much wraps up the questions that we've had. In summary, thank you for joining today's session. You can see over the 20 plus years that KOOTH has been going, we're here on the purpose to help tackle this growing crisis in youth mental health, and with an incredible experience that we've got in how to do that, and sort of come from our people, and then also technology that we built, and obviously with Saluna in California, the ability for us to dream and imagine and deliver a next generation platform. So we're really excited about what we're doing. We'll tell you more about all of this when hopefully you can join us at our next gathering, which will be at the end of September, when we'll do a more fuller review of our H1. And in the meantime, as Sanjay mentioned, you can look at an abundance of brokers that are covering us. So we very helpfully put a essentially consensus of that on our investor website if you'd like to see what market expectations are. And so with that, I'd just like to thank you for your time and appreciate the questions. And we'll see you in September.
Perfect. Tim, Sanjay, thank you very much indeed for updating investors this morning. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can really better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of KOOTH PLC, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, so good morning to you all.